Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda. It is Wednesday, which means it's Wednesdays with Will. Before I get into that, let me tell you a little tale about recording this. And now I'm crooked again too. There we go. So I tried to record this morning and it was kind of a mess. So I started over. I recorded it again. Okay, and then I started playing it back and I was just all over the place. I think the coffee I had this morning was still too fresh in my veins. Okay. This afternoon, I refilmed it and I made sure to put my new microphone on, which I'm not wearing right now. And I went to go play it back and there's no sound. I don't know what it is with this microphone. I don't know if it's not, I put the little thing in. I don't know. I just dropped. Oh, well. It doesn't work. So now I have to do this again so you can actually hear what I'm saying. Anyway, I am here to talk about Antony and Cleopatra, our January play. So, I know the historical story of Antony and Cleopatra is very familiar, but I will kind of summarize it at a very high level in relation to where this play is. So, and before I start that, one quick character note. When I say Caesar, unless I specify otherwise, I mean Octavius Caesar. Octavius, for some reason, that's hard for me to say. So Caesar is Octavius Caesar unless otherwise specified. There is also a character named Octavia, so it's a little, kind of makes things less confusing. So at the time we start this play, Mark Antony, has already been in a relationship. He's been in for a while because they have kids, relationship with Cleopatra, who is the queen of Egypt. We all know who Cleopatra is. And he's also in sort of a three-way alliance with Caesar and another guy named Lepidus to fight Pompey. So they're kind of at war with Pompey. At this point, those three are allies. So they're fighting, they beat Pompey, and they have a dinner party with him. That whole thing's weird. I don't quite... Yeah, they have a dinner party. But also early on, Mark Antony is having a relationship with Cleopatra, but he's also married to a woman named Livia, who is not actually a character in this play, but she does die. And so that happens off screen. He gets word that his wife, Livia, has died while he's with Cleopatra. And that, of course, makes him single. And it is then suggested, and it occurs, that as sort of let's cement our alliance relationship with Caesar, that Antony marries Octavia, who is Caesar's sister. And he does that, which Cleopatra is not exactly happy about, as one can guess, because he hasn't broken it off with Cleopatra. He's just married this other woman. But he goes back to Cleopatra because she's Cleopatra. She's not the first Roman he's not the first Roman she's conquered. And Octavia, for obvious reasons, does not like this. And Caesar, who loves his sister, does not like this. And so now Antony and Caesar are enemies. And they start having these battles. And whenever a battle doesn't go Antony's way, he does this supremely annoying to me thing of blaming Cleopatra for it, saying that she must have double-crossed them. It's all her fault. And I find that really annoying. And what makes it even worse is then Cleopatra's reaction to this is to start crying and begging forgiveness, even though she didn't do anything. I'm going to get more into my feelings about Cleopatra in a bit. So this continues. Caesar and Antony are having their battles. I am cutting out a lot of this is very high level. I'm cutting out some of the minor secondary characters here that do things. But it gets to a big final battle where Antony loses. And as his habit, he blames Cleopatra for this. So Cleopatra goes off to her monument, which I'm assuming is some sort of temple that she has with her ladies. And she tells a messenger to go tell Antony that she's dead. And her final words were, Antony. So the messenger goes and does this. And Antony's like, because he's been blaming Cleopatra for this loss, of course. And he is so upset about it. He realizes that he was wrong and he needs to kill himself. So this is a weird thing. He can't kill himself. He gets like someone else to try to kill him. And the guy's like, I won't kill you. He's like, I order you to kill me. And so the guy goes, okay, turn around. You gotta face that way. And so, Antony's like, kill me. And the guy kills himself. I don't know, not the choice I would have made. And then Antony's like, oh no, now I have to kill myself. But he doesn't quite do that. Like, he stabs himself, but he doesn't die. And so they carry him, and he's like, bleh, laying on the ground, bleeding out. And a messenger comes, and I think it's a different messenger from Cleopatra, saying, oh no, Cleopatra is alive. So they carry him, like his men carry him up to Cleopatra's monument, and like apparently just leave him there. Because then Cleopatra and her ladies in waiting have to carry him in, which is, I listened to this as I read, so I heard a lot of, I gotta carry him, sort of noises, which was very funny. And he dies in true Shakespearean manner. And then Cleopatra, realizing what has done, decides she's going to kill herself. And we all know how she does that. She does it with, there are two asps, Nile serpents, asps in her basket, and they sneak to her, and she attaches one to her chest and one to her arm, and she dies of the poison. And she does that in a dramatic Shakespearean way. And that's it. And then Caesar shows up and he says, oh, those two should be buried together. There you go. That's Antony and Cleopatra in a nutshell. So this was not my favorite Shakespeare play. It did not live up to my expectation. Now, I did also go into this with more of an expectation than I did some other plays that I haven't read, because I already know the story of Antony and Cleopatra. I already know kind of historically what these people were supposedly like, and so I did have expectations of that. And that's one of my issues with this. Actually, it's both of my issues with it. The first one is, and this isn't really a problem, it's just a thing. When Shakespeare wrote these plays, all of his plays, including this one, he wrote them to be performed and to be watched. He didn't write them for us to sit and read them. So that's not the way they're written. And lots of times this doesn't make a difference. Othello, excellent on the page, excellent on stage, right? This is not like that. These characters felt really flat to me, but I could also recognize that even though they seemed flat on the page, there was actually a lot of room for actors and directors to develop them in their own way. So really, this is a play that needs to be watched more than read. I think it really is a disservice to just read it. I really think you need to watch it. So there is that. My other big frustration is Cleopatra. So as I said, we all kind of have our idea of what Cleopatra was like. And, I would see Cleopatra as a very strong woman. As I said, Antony was not the first Roman she conquered. She and Julius Caesar had their thing too. She is politically minded, but also passionate. Also passionate. She is successful as a ruler. She can command armies, all these things. So I expected that sort of character. And I know that Shakespeare can write that sort of character because we've seen that in other plays. In the ones that we have read for part of this, we have Volumnia in Coriolanus, who is, she's not a huge character, but she has that sort of leading. He can write that. So it's not unreasonable for me to expect that kind of character. But that's not the character we get here. Cleopatra basically is in two modes. One is being super sexy for Antony, and the other one is crying and begging his forgiveness, usually for things she did not do. And I found that really frustrating. Again, there's room for actors to develop this in a way that they interpret it. And maybe they can work with these words and interpret it to get a different kind of Cleopatra out of that. But as far as reading, I was disappointed with that. So those are my feelings about Antony and Cleopatra. Now, if you have not been here before, let me pull this up. Once I talk about a play, once we've read it, I do a ranking. And I've borrowed this method from the All About Agatha podcast, where they read and rank Agatha Christie novels. So what it is I have a handful of categories that I rank the play on, 1 to 5, 5 highest, 1 lowest, in each one, which gives me a subtitle. And then after that, I have one final category of its time, which could be something that doesn't age well, like it's a little offensive now sort of thing. Or it could be, and there is a play that there is an example of this, like the humor just doesn't carry through. It's like, this is not even something that's funny to us anymore. So it can be one of those things, something that just kind of keeps it in the 16th, 17th century and doesn't translate well to the 21st. And whatever I give that is deducted from the subtotal, which gives me a final, and then I use that to rank it. So let me go through how I rated Antony and Cleopatra, and then I'll go through all of my ratings. So my first rating is, what did I rate it? Like, what did I rate it on Goodreads and Storygraph? And I gave this 3. And that to me usually is, I would recommend it, but maybe not wholeheartedly, or I'd only recommend it to certain people. That's kind of where I am with this. I would recommend it, but not wholeheartedly. I mean, you know, it's Shakespeare. It's Shakespeare. It's not that it's bad. It's not like another one that I did give a bad rating to because I think it's a bad play. It's Winter's Tale. But this one, it's not that it's bad. It's just, this book is not the way to consume it. So 3 stars. And the next one is Reputation. This is how well known the play is. There are 4 plays that will get 5 stars on this. We haven't read any of them yet, but I can tell you they'll get 5 stars. Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. This one I gave 4 stars. I think if someone said, who wrote Antony and Cleopatra, someone would go Shakespeare. But if you ask someone to name all the Shakespeare plays, they may or may not name Antony and Cleopatra, if that makes sense. Another play we read that I gave, I gave here one that was 1. What one was that? Cymbeline. So Cymbeline, if someone said name all the Shakespeare plays, they probably wouldn't name Cymbeline. And if you said who wrote Cymbeline, they might not be able to answer that. So that's a 1-star one. But I gave this 4 because I do think that, like, yes, they might say Antony and Cleopatra is a Shakespeare play, but if you said who wrote Antony and Cleopatra, they would say Shakespeare. Okay. The next category is a new one. It replaces an old one that I realized was not working, but this one is stickiness. At the end of each year in December, I go back and I reevaluate everything. And this is where you're going to see the most change because it's hard to see how sticky a play is going to be when you just finished reading it. So I can only do my best guess at this one. And I gave this one a 3. I will always remember the story because I went into it knowing the story. I did. I came in knowing the story. So a 3. That's kind of where I think I'm going to be with this one. Our next category is characters. And this is how nuanced the characters are, how well drawn they are, how memorable they are. And this is a 2 because, first of all, I have my issues with Cleopatra. Secondly, the other characters, they are the characters that you would see in other Shakespeare plays. They are the military men, the politicians. They are the ones you're going to see over and over again. It works. I mean, they work together well here, but the characters themselves aren't really that unique. So I gave it a 2. And then I have poetry. So this is how beautiful I find the language. Are there lots of lines that are famous or terms that come from it? That sort of thing. How much has it worked itself into our modern lexicon? And this one I also gave a 2. This just doesn't feel like a super poetic Shakespeare play. There are a couple passages that I would find poetic, not super poetic. There's nothing where I went after I read it. As for terms and phrases that made it into the modern lexicon, really only one stood out to me, and that's not even a really famous one, and that is salad-a-days. I didn't tab where it actually shows up, but I believe it's in Act 1. And Cleopatra says, back in my salad days when my judgment was green, I think, which just means salad days means back in your youth. That's a phrase I've heard. If someone said it, I know what it is, but it's not a phrase I use. So I only gave this a 2 for that. And then the final category to get our subtitle is Would I See This? And I actually changed this between the second and third time I filmed this, something like that. So a 5 for this would be I would travel to see this. A 1 would be you could not pay me to see this. And I put this as a 4, but for slightly different reasons. So a 4 was like, I am definitely going to go see it no matter what. You know, if it's in my area. I may not travel to see it, but I definitely want to see it if it's going to be here. And I do want to see it if it's in my area. But I think more importantly is I want to see several performances of this, because I think every performance can be so different, because this is a play that has so much room for interpretation. So that's why I put it a 4. It's kind of a unique 4, but that's where I put it. So that gave me a subtotal of 18 points. Now, as for of its time, I only took 1 point off. 1 is the lowest I'm going to go. There wasn't really anything here that stuck out to me of being kind of like something that didn't age well. They did refer to Herod of the Jewry, which that didn't bother me that much, because Herod was king of the Jews. And they're at this point referring to Herod the Great. That's just what he was. It didn't strike me as being something that would be considered anti-Semitic now. If I'm wrong on that, let me know. Also, I didn't think that we were missing anything in this. I think you read this or see this play, you understand everything. It's like, yeah, everything is there. So I only gave it a 1. So that brings the total to 17. So let me go through the rankings. So far, we've done 11 plays. In 11th place, we have The Winter's Tale. It's probably going to stay in last place. Number 10, we have Love's Labour's Lost, which is another play that really depends on the interpretation. But in this case, it's because the humor in it is just not things that are humorous in the 21st century. And so it's really on the actors performing it to create humor within this play. And then in 9th place, we have Antony and Cleopatra for all the reasons I just outlined. In 8th place, we have Cymbeline. Cymbeline is a hot mess. It's an entertaining hot mess, but it is a hot mess. And in 7th place, we have The Merry Wives of Windsor, which is very entertaining. But it is also it is definitely of the plays that we have read so far, the fluffiest. And I think it probably will just stay the fluffiest Shakespeare play. It's actually a fan service play. Elizabeth I really liked the character of Falstaff and asked Shakespeare to write a play centered around Falstaff, and that was this. A lot of sex jokes. It's just not, it's just kind of entertaining for what it is. It's like the sitcom of Shakespeare plays. In 6th place, I have Coriolanus. So this is interesting. So Bookish Best Friend and I have season tickets to Portland Center Stage, and every year they do a Shakespeare play. Last year, they did Coriolanus, and I read Coriolanus in preparation for that. And so I went in knowing the play. Bookish Best Friend did not read Coriolanus, so she went in kind of blind to it. And after seeing 12th Night, which is what we saw this year, which was fantastic, she did say she had trouble with Coriolanus, just kind of following it and kind of understanding what it was saying. And I do think Coriolanus is a difficult play in that regard. However, if you read it ahead of time, it's a little easier to kind of follow. Coriolanus is very political. And in our current reality, it's interesting to read Coriolanus. Things don't line up one-to-one, but Coriolanus does evoke some things we are going through now, and it is an interesting way to kind of think about our reality. So Coriolanus is in 6th place. We have two plays tied for 5th place. The first is The Merchant of Venice, and this is one that took a hit in the of its time category. Based on the subtotal number, so before we factor that in, it was the second highest rated play. But it's just there's a lot of anti-Semitism in it. And the thing is, I think when it was written, it was very forward-thinking, and it was actually challenging anti-Semitism. And I respect that. But in the 21st century, there's enough other stuff kind of around it that you can't untie that. And it just is anti-Semitic at this point. There's something that I think readers need to be aware of that. I'm not saying don't read it. I'm saying you need to be aware of it so that you can understand that this is not okay, that this is, this one needs context is what I'm trying to say. So otherwise it's a great play, by the way. I really liked it. There you go. And the other play that we have in 5th place is the only one of the history plays we've read. This is, I think, considered a tragedy, not a history. And that is Henry IV, Part 1. So it's called Henry IV, Part 1, but it's actually about Prince Hal. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the father-son frustration dynamics. It's got Falstaff. I think Prince Hal was a great character. I enjoyed it. You know, I also enjoyed the fact that the adaptation I watched was the episode of The Hollow Crown, which was this play that had Tom Hiddleston. So I really enjoyed Henry IV, Part 1. I actually didn't expect to, but I did. I did enjoy it. So in 3rd place, we have The Tempest. This is my husband's favorite play. And the reason 3rd place is pretty good, but the reason is not, well, I don't want to say the reason isn't, because there are reasons why the other two are where they are. But Tempest is, I have no criticism of The Tempest. I think it's a great play. It's inventive. It says a lot. There's a preference issue for me in it. And that is a lot of the humor in The Tempest is drunk humor. And that's not my favorite. Not criticizing it. It's just a preference. I prefer sex jokes, apparently. Yeah. So in 2nd place is my very favorite Shakespeare play, and it shall remain my favorite Shakespeare play, and that is Twelfth Night. I saw this when I was in college and I did a summer term in England, and we went to Stratford and saw the RSC production of it. And so it has very sentimental meaning to me. It's also just a fun play that brings a smile to your face. So I really enjoyed Twelfth Night. And our number 1 play is Othello, which is super juicy. I really enjoyed Othello. Now, I had seen Othello before I read it, but it's one, unlike Antony and Cleopatra, that is just as good on page. Like you get it on the page, just like you get it when you see it. So those are the plays we've done so far. In February, we are reading something completely different. We are reading Much Ado About Nothing. So this is one that a lot of people are familiar with because of the Kenneth Branagh movie. There's been at least one other movie version since then. I think Joss Whedon did one that was set, if not in the present day, like in the mid 20th century maybe, but it's in black and white, and it had like Clark Gregg and Jennifer Grey in it back when they were married. I don't know. I might watch that, except I don't really like Joss Whedon, but whatever. There are other productions to see besides the Kenneth Branagh version. Not that there's anything wrong with the Kenneth Branagh version. I've just seen it very often. I've seen it a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. So I don't know if I'm going to watch Much Ado About Nothing, but I am excited to read that in February. If you'd like to join us on my Discord, there's a thread called the Bard Room, and that's where we discuss these plays kind of lightly because we read it at different paces during the month, but we would love to have you if you'd like to join us, and you can always just drop in and out depending on the play. That's perfectly fine. So yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on Antony and Cleopatra. If you've read it, please let me know your thoughts below, because I would be very interested to hear what other people think of it. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.